On paper, we looked like we were rock stars. Like we were going out clubbing, we were buying designer clothing, we were getting expensive wine, we were going on amazing travel and vacations, and we clearly couldn't afford that.
Between the two of us, we had $51,000 in credit card debt.
Welcome to Financial Freestyle here on Yahoo Finance, and it's your host, Ross Mack. Now look, guys, no matter where you are on your financial journey, whether you're a seasoned Wall Street professional, a retail investor, or just looking to start out, every success begins with a single step, and you've landed at the right spot. In this series, I'm sitting down with some of the most influential minds in finance to explore their paths to becoming economically successful. And today, I'm excited to chat with John and David Auten-Schneider, co-hosts of Living Not So Fabulously here on Yahoo Finance. Let's dive right in, gentlemen. Thanks so much for taking some time to talk with me.
Of course. Thank you for having us.
Definitely glad to be here.
Without a doubt. My guys are calling in from Ohio.
Yep.
Yeah,
Toledo.
Buckeyes fans.
Oh, Buckeyes. Yeah. So look, let's actually start, one, how did you guys come up with the concept of, debt-free guys, right? Like, I think that there's an epidemic in this country when it comes to debt, and you guys are some of the people that are at the forefront of helping people become debt-free. Let's talk about, your journey.
Sure thing.
Sure. So our backstory is that John and I were working in financial services when we first met. We got together, and unlike everything that we told everybody to do, we did not have the money conversation while we were first dating. It wasn't until a year and a half after we got together that we had kind of our aha moment because we wanted to, or we had this fantasy of purchasing land in the mountains and building a dream vacation home. And the reality was we didn't even own a home to vacation away from. We were on the way home from the mountains, having this conversation about what kind of home we could build and buy. And eventually, as we went down the mountain, our conversation got lower and lower in emotion, in excitement about being able to buy land and build a place. And by the time we pulled up in front of our place, we said to each other, we are financial messes. And that's when we confessed to each other that between the two of us, we had $51,000 in credit card debt. So as I said at the outset, we were telling a lot of people what they should be doing with their money as advisors, and we were not doing any of that ourselves. So
that moment was a catalyst for us to sort of start having the money conversation. And we came up with a plan to pay off our debt. And we were able to pay that off within under 3 years. And toward the end of paying off our debt, we thought, well, now we have this professional experience with our finances, but now we also have this personal experience with our finances, a struggle that a lot of people have. Maybe there's a way that we can use this to help folks. And we decided to write a book. And we eventually wrote a book, and our thought, as naive as we were, was that we were going to publish this book, and then Oprah would invite us onto her television show. We would reach millions of people. All of a sudden, we were changing people's lives. And that's actually not how it happened. But that was actually the pivot point where we decided to get into blogging, podcasting, and all of that.
So what I find interesting is that you guys had that conversation, right? And I think that finance is taboo, right? You don't need to know how much I have in my 401k. You don't need to know how much debt I have. You need to know what my credit score is. How did you guys overcome those insecurities to actually have that convo?
honestly, I think it was the fact that we were locked in a car going 65, 75 miles an hour down the highway. And we started talking about what we really wanted, right? We had this fantasy, we had this dream of a bigger and better life. And it was that kind of fantasy that prompted us to start talking about what we could afford. And as I said earlier, it was kind of a slap in the face of, well, you can't afford anything. You literally live in a basement apartment. You're physically and financially in a hole. You don't have the capability to have the life that you want. And that's, I think, was the big shock for us. Was we thought everything was going along just fine. We were living the American dream, but the reality is we weren't. We were digging ourselves further and further into debt. And I think that between the two of us, we recognized the destiny or the destination of where we wanted our lives to be was completely different than the path that we were on.
Well, one, right? Congratulations on having that conversation, because I think a lot of people don't. And this is your wake-up call to the people that are watching. Have that conversation, that uncomfortable conversation. The goal is to make uncomfortable conversations comfortable, right? And so let's have the next uncomfortable conversation. How did you get out of debt?
Sure thing. So for context, this was about 2003. I don't know exactly what the average household debt was at that time, but for us, that seemed almost insurmountable. And so at that point, we weren't as prolific on the internet and doing our research. We actually went to the library, read a lot of personal finance books, and we found that there were two popular strategies for paying off debt at that time: the snowball method and the avalanche method. The snowball method says to pay off the lowest balance first and get some of those quick wins, which is psychologically good. The avalanche method says to pay off the credit cards that have the highest interest rate, which in the long run saves you more money. But in both cases, for many people, including us, it can take a long time to pay off that debt. And we just didn't have that kind of patience. So we thought, what variable can we take away to make paying off that debt easier? And that was the high interest rate that we were paying on our credit card. At that time, I think about 20%. And we thought, is there a way for us to make that variable disappear? And so we thought about it. And we realized if we strategically use 0% interest rate credit cards and use the term that we had, anywhere from 18 to 24 months is what they were offering at that time. What I'm seeing right now in the market is about a peak of about 21 months. If we could use that to our advantage and expedite paying off our debt, try to find some extra money in our budget to throw more money towards our credit card debt, could we become debt-free faster? And David had estimated with the fancy Excel spreadsheet that we would probably be able to become debt-free within 3 to 4 years. And we were able to do it just under 3 years. And so that's actually the strategy that we use to help our clients, and the strategy that we call the debt lasso method, which we recently talked about actually on a wealth segment with Brad Smith.
The debt lasso, I love it. So to be clear, right, is this like a balance transfer card that has 0% APR for a certain time? You say the market has it kind of 18 to 21 months. Can you talk about how that happens, right? I would presume, you got to apply for that. Do they run your credit? Is it hard or soft inquiry? What happens to your credit utilization? Like, let's kind of walk the audience through that process.
Right. Yeah. So just to be clear, this step of doing a balance transfer or moving money to a low interest loan is just one step of the debt lasso method. The other 4 steps are vital, but this particular step, moving the money to another location, it does rely on the fact that you have at least a decent credit score. Your credit score doesn't need to be excellent to do this. We know a lot of individuals who have credit scores in the 660 to 700 range who are able to get a balance transfer card or a low interest loan. Really, the idea here is, for a lot of consumers, they have multiple credit cards, they're making multiple payments a month, and the whole idea is to try to bring that into as few locations as possible at that lowest interest rate. You are correct that doing a balance transfer does require you to apply for a credit card or a loan. That will be a hit to your credit score, because they will go out and look at your credit history and your credit report. So you will want to make sure that you're not looking at applying at multiple credit cards at the same time or loans at the same time, because that will drop your credit score and maybe make it harder for you to get the one that you truly want. Do a little bit of investigating, find out what the minimum credit score is. There are certain apps out there that do allow you to kind of do what's kind of a pre-application to actually see if you might be able to apply and be approved. So try those kinds of tools to see if you can get a pre-approval without having it hit your credit score. And then the balance transfer is one that, for most of these balance transfer cards, you can actually do it online. You open up the credit card online, you set up the transfer online, you just plug in your current credit card number, and they send the check over to the other bank, or actually in these days, it's an electronic transfer. So all of that is done behind the scenes. You're just set up with a new account, with a new credit balance and interest rate, and you know what those terms are. Oftentimes, they're going to post a minimum payment. of course, you don't want to make the minimum payment because that just kicks the can further down the road. And that's, I would say, is the most important piece of this whole thing, is that don't use your balance transfers to kick the can down the road, because eventually you're going to run out of cans to kick down the road.
So that's remarkable, right? So the debt lasso method, right? Like obviously that was just one step of four, right? Can you actually talk about maybe like the consumer psychology standpoint where it comes to like, one, not kicking the can down the road, but two, not having that impulsive buying where you effectively, taking out more credit, right? Like, how do you stay focused on your plan to actually pay this off in that 18 or 20 months or so?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's I think what helped David and me to get out of our debt so quickly, it was that we started to have that conversation after that we came down from Winter Park in Colorado and realized we couldn't buy that dream home, was that, well, why weren't our lives going in the direction that they were going? What is it we were looking for? And the very first exercise that we did that following weekend was that David went and grabbed all of our statements for all of our accounts, credit cards, checking, savings, everything that he could find. And he itemized all of our expenses for the previous 12 months. And when he did that spending analysis and we looked at it, on paper, we looked like we were rock stars. Like we were going out clubbing, we were buying designer clothing, we were getting expensive wine, we were going on amazing travel and vacations. And we clearly couldn't afford that. But we weren't happy with the direction our lives were going. So the question was, why are we on this hedonic treadmill? What's going on that we can't be happy with the things that we already have, and we continue to put ourselves further and further into debt, even though we had all this theoretical knowledge helping other people with their finances? And it was getting crystal clear on what mattered most to us, what it is that we truly wanted. The $10,000 to $20,000 bottles worth of wine that we were buying a year just to drink at home was not actually providing us life satisfaction. But what we really wanted was retirement security. But we weren't on that trajectory. What we really wanted to do was to be able to spend more time together. We wanted to give more back to our community. And we realized when we figured out what we wanted, if we were able to align our spending with what truly mattered to us, and then that would get us to that end goal much more quickly. And it was that psychology of saying, I'm going to get off this hedonic treadmill and start planning for the things that I truly want in life, and not let marketing, consumerism, what have you, tell me what's going to make me happier. Because the next Apple Watch, the next phone, the next trip isn't necessarily going to make me happy, which is why I continue to buy more and more stuff. So once you get clear on what that is, focus on that goal, even during the hard times when you're like, I don't really want to send that much money to my credit cards. I'd much rather, go out for a fancy dinner. Then you focus on what you truly want, and you'll be able to get there more quickly, even during those hard times.
When you think about it, right, like a lot of people are overspending just from past financial trauma, right? When I went on my own journey of trying to figure out what's the best ways to help everyday consumers, you realize, like, one, there are financial therapists that actually kind of go and figure out what's your root cause for you wanting to overspend. And so I love the fact that you guys had your statements saying, what are we spending our money on, right? I think the first step is write it all down and actually see what you're spending, because it's so much impulse buying. So I love that you guys shared that. Look, guys, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll have more with Living Not So Fabulously hosts, John and David Auten-Schneider. All right, guys, welcome back to Financial Freestyle. And look, man, today we're joined with none other than Living Not So Fabulously hosts, John and David Auten-Schneider. And look, man, we're talking about something that I find to be kind of taboo. Not a lot of people talk about it, but it's a silent killer. It's not secondhand smoke, people. It's debt. It's the one thing that we just live. We keep paying the minimum. We keep paying the minimums. You look up 10 years later, you done paid 3x or 5x of what you actually borrowed. So let's talk about debt. And I saw an interesting stat, right, about the holiday spending. It said over 1/3 of Americans took on holiday debt to the tune of about $1,200, right? How do you get out of this holiday debt? What do we as Americans need to do better?
Honestly, I think that there is a psychological and emotional check that many of us need to do during the holiday spending season. Uh, there, we feel compelled, right, to whether it's for ourselves, which I think is a very new thing, right? You see all these commercials. You bought the present for your friends or for your family. Now buy one for yourself. So we're not only now being told to buy or compelled to buy for other people, we also feel guilty for not treating ourselves, or we want to treat ourselves. And so we actually end up spending more. I think that the psychological check we need to make is, why are we doing this spending? What is the urge that we have to spend and spend money? For many of us, spend money we don't have, so that we can feel what? What is the feeling that I'm trying to maybe mask or cover up or make go away inside of me, that says I have to impress my family, I have to impress my friends, I have to impress people around me. It's one of the things that John and I look at when we talk about personal finance. We say that personal finance is very much like the Pareto principle. 80% of it is transactional. It's the things that all of us do. I swipe a credit card the same way you swipe a credit card. I use a dollar bill the same way you do. But the other 20% is the personal side of personal finance. And that's about who we are inside, right? Who I am, the way I was raised, the socioeconomic status that I had. For us, it's our gender or sexual orientation or gender identity. And for some people, it's the color of their skin. All of that plays into how we end up using money. And so during the holiday season, I think especially, we need to ask ourselves, am I trying to do something that makes me feel better than really what I should be doing, because I'm going to end up feeling worse further down the road?
Kind of coming back full circle to you guys becoming debt free, getting out of 51,000. How would you say your spending habits have changed relative to being out of debt? Right? Like, kind of, is your outlook the same, or is it that now I could actually afford it, or is it that you're budgeting for these things? Like, kind of, how has your your financial psychology effectively changed since then?
Yeah, I'll be honest. John and I we're very upfront and transparent about this. We paid all that debt off in under 3 years, and 6 months later, we found ourselves, actually, it was about a year later, we found ourselves with $6,000 in credit card debt again, because we did what most people do. They think of the end goal being having a zero balance on your credit cards, and then you can go back to living the life that you always wanted. And for us, we realized what we weren't doing is we weren't keeping the habits that got us out of debt and making those permanent habits. And so that's when we really kind of made some deep changes to who we were and the way we spent, because we said to ourselves, what is it that we truly wanted? And when it came down to it, as John mentioned, we wanted to save for retirement. We wanted to give back to our community. We wanted to spend more time together. And for us, that meant starting a business so that we could spend our working hours together. And so when we implemented that true change of saying, when we spend money, is it going to what it is that we truly want, or is it just a dopamine hit in the moment? That's when things really started to change for us. We started to accumulate money in our retirement accounts. We started to put money aside for our emergency savings at a much larger rate. And that's when all of a sudden we saw the fruits of that labor, actually, in seeing that growth and growing wealth for ourselves.
That's remarkable, right? How many people get out of debt only to go right back in, right? It's that thing we talked about earlier, right? The psychology. What is that past trauma that make you continue to go back to it, right? I tell people all the time, I remember as a kid driving past McDonald's, and you ask your parents, can you get McDonald's? They say either one or two things. We got McDonald's at home, or do you got McDonald's money? And that's so funny because when you think about it, people now might be more inclined to Uber Eats, right? And so, to your point, the concept of money is so you don't have to go in your pocket anymore. It's auto pay, right? Or you could just tap your phone. And so you don't really know what you're spending until you get that bill. And so it's, like, when you look at where we are, it's so easy to get into debt, and you don't know until it's too far. Right now, we got buy now, pay later. And so I think the only way to truly do it is, like you guys say, right? Debt last. So I love that, by the way. This is the first time I heard it. I hope you guys get that trademarked and some more.
We have a We have another term that we call the debt depression spiral. And this is something that we find that a lot of our clients need to break themselves away from. It's that you've got this negative emotion. You're just not feeling happy. You're not feeling right. You got to do something to make yourself feel better. And what's the easiest way in our culture in America to be able to make yourself feel better? Well, it's to go online to buy some stuff or go to the mall and buy some stuff. And you get that dopamine hit and you feel good. And you might have gotten yourself some new shoes and a new purse and you look pretty when you go out. So that's another dopamine rush. But then a month or so later, you get the credit card bill in the mail. And all of a sudden, that negative feeling comes back. And then you kind of think, okay, well, how can I make this feel better? Well, I'm going to go buy some more stuff. And you're just kind of on this vicious cycle of the debt depression spiral. And we need to break ourselves away from it. And I think one of the challenges that we have as Americans is that real wages aren't keeping up with the cost of inflation. Real wages haven't really gone up a whole lot since the 1970s. But these are major American corporations are creating a more and more streamlined consumer culture. So as you were saying before, you can just easily buy something by looking at your watch, right? And all of a sudden you have food at your front door.
Yep.
But they're not keeping wages up. So what do we have to do? We almost have to rely on our credit cards. And a colleague and friend of ours, Paul Donovan, who's the chief economist over at UBS, talks about credit cards create this sort of wealth illusion, right? I've got access to all this credit, so I'm able to subsidize the lifestyle that I want, but I can't necessarily afford it because I don't have the income to be able to cover that. So we've got to figure out a way that we can put more pressure on corporations to raise wages while simultaneously we figure out a way that we can take some personal responsibility for it and sort of try to jump off of that debt depression spiral.
You know what I find interesting about America is the fact that you have to go in debt in order to prove that you should be able to get other money, right? You can't get a credit score without at one point borrowing money, right? And so to your point, it's like it's this illusion where especially, you need financial literacy early on because you look up and you literally are, I got $10,000 of free money. No, you got to pay that back. And once you do borrow, this accruing at 25+%, annual interest rate. And so, I think that, this spiral is interesting. I like that you use that word.
The world we live in today, we have often heard this phrase that compounding interest is the eighth wonder of the world. The world we live in today, the individuals, it's a double-edged sword. The individuals who are using it to hurt themselves are going to keep going down. And the individuals who use it to help themselves are going to keep going up. And the individuals who are using it to help themselves are the individuals who are investing. And the only way you can invest is if you get off the debt cycle of continually paying money to your credit cards and low interest loans or buy now, pay later. All of that is helping you go further and further down so that you don't have the ability to use compounding interest to your advantage.
I love that you said it. My cousin Albert Einstein, eighth wonder of the world. Compound interest. Those who get it, earn it. Those who don't, pay it. All right, guys, that's it for this episode of Financial Freestyle. I want to give a huge shout out and a big thanks to my guests, John and David Auten-Schneider, co-hosts of Living Not So Fabulously, for sharing their insights and inspiring us all today. Hope we give you guys something to actually think about when it comes to your own financial journey. And first step, you got to get out that debt. You got to budget and get out that debt. But guys, be sure to tune in next week for a brand new episode here on Yahoo Finance.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.